Well, hello. There's Rocky. He was just asleep, but he just woke up. I don't know what you can see because I got the phone turned around here. But there he is. I'm using my old phone here. There he is. Um, anyway, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep. It's quite cold in here. And I don't want to turn on the heat just yet because I can't really afford the propane right now. So I'm trying to get by just with the hot water bottles, which they're warm, but it's cold in here. It's tough. Anyway, I'll put them around me here, though. I will, just the same. There we go. Anyway, I guess while I'm here, we're here, I'll tell you another story. I don't think I've ever told the story about the brief stint I had working in a shoe warehouse in 1989. That was fun. Yeah, it was really fun. I'll tell you all about that anyway. Oh, look who's here. Oh my goodness. Hello. Hi, Rocky. Oh, there we go. He was standing on my arm, so I couldn't start petting him just yet, but he just moved, so now I can pet him. Anyway, he's purring. You're very purry and furry, you are. Yes, you are. Anyway, yes, in 1989, I went to work in a shoe warehouse. When I went to see about the job, the guy there that was in charge, a fellow by the name of Brian Bingley, when I was working there, people used to just call him Bing. This Brian Bingley, or Bing, there anyway, kind of reminded me of Bing Crosby, the singer or whatever. But anyway, this Brian Bingley, when I went for the job there, he was the guy I had to talk to, and he told me, he said, we pay $5 an hour, and we expect a good day's work out of you for a good day's pay. Well, this was in 1989. $5 an hour was not a good day's pay. It wasn't the worst. I mean, you could be earning less than that, but still, $5 an hour wouldn't really be considered a good day's pay in 1989. But I needed the job, and you could survive on that in 1989. There'd be no surviving on it today. I mean, you could be making $30 an hour and starve to death today, but in 1989, it would pay your rent and put some food on the table and put a little gas in your car. So, anyway, I went to work in the shoe warehouse, in the Brown Shoe Company of Canada Limited warehouse, and in Perth, Ontario, Canada. Anyway, yeah, it was quite a place anyway. They had a little red-haired woman working in there who was kind of a supervisor. Looked like a woodpecker. Her name was Fern. I can't remember her last name now, but her first name was Fern. These people now would all be quite elderly, and probably most, if not all of them, are dead now, so I'll use their names anyway. And they'd be long retired, too. And like I say, most of them, or if not all of them, are dead now, anyway. But anyway, this Fern lady, she was a real little spitfire. And she loved to yell and scream and just, rip a strip off you. And she'd tell you to do something, and she'd go away, and you'd be doing the job she told you to do. And she'd come back 5 or 10 minutes later and rip a strip off you for doing the job that she just told you to do. Yeah, that was fun. It's like she'd set you up so she could yell at you in a few minutes. But, okay. Oh my goodness, Rocky. Anyway, there was her, and there was another supervisor there, and his name was Emmanuel Roca. That was his name. And it was hard to understand him. Okay. I don't think I'm going to be able to tell this story right now. I'm getting too much love from my kitty cat here to be able to tell the story in any intelligible way. But let me try anyway. This Emmanuel Roca, I don't even know this was possible, but he was part French and part English, and he was also deaf. So, like, he had a French accent and an English accent combined, like a British accent, a very heavy British accent, but also with a French accent in there. And he was also deaf. So he was very difficult to understand, and he had a very low voice. The tone of his voice was very low. And I'm a little bit deaf myself because I had the mumps when I was 5, and it robbed me a part of my hearing. And so, uh, anyway, what happened? Okay, Rocky, go over there, sweetheart. Yeah, go somewhere. Go over that way. There you go. Okay. Oh my goodness. You kill me with love, you will. There's worse ways to die, though, but still. Um, Here we go. There he goes. He's gonna have a bite to eat on the table there. All right. Anyway, Emmanuel Roca, very low voice, and so I have trouble to, if there's background noise, I have trouble to hear, and I a lot of the time I have trouble understanding men when they talk if their voice is really low. I have trouble making out the words. Basically, it all gets garbled. And this guy, with his French combination British accent and also being deaf, he'd walk up to me and he'd be pointing here and there, and he'd be saying, and this is how it sounded to me. It was just like, that's how it would sound. I wouldn't understand anything he said. And, of course, I'd be looking at him dumbfounded. I'd be saying, pardon me? What? What? Pardon me? What do you want? He'd get mad then, and he'd start shoving me. He'd plant his hands in my chest, and he'd start pushing me around. And he'd roar in my face, and this was the only time I ever understood anything he said. The only words that ever came out of his mouth that I understood were when he would do this. And what he would say is, and this is how it sounded, he'd be pushing me around and roaring in my face, cat fur, and he'd be saying, "Go on, do it now." That's what you'd hear. It is, "Go on, do it now." He was shoving me around. I had no idea what he wanted me to do, so I just kind of walk away from him, ignore him. And anyway, yeah, that was fun. There was one time they had me there pushing a broom in underneath all the conveyor belts, sweeping all the crud and garbage and stuff that just falls down, onto the floor. So I'm pushing all this stuff out from under the conveyor belts and eliminating that, like I was told to do. And I had already done one entire conveyor belt, and I was now a few feet away working on the next one, because they were side by side, these things were, going through the factory. And the little Spitfire lady, Fern, she comes over and she starts yelling at me, telling me what an awful job I was doing and that I needed to shape up and all the rest of it, that I was just doing a terrible job at that. And, if I wanted to retain my employment there, I'd better start doing far better than I was doing. And then she pointed behind us there to the one that I had just done, and she said, "No, you see that? That's what it should look like. Right there," she said. See how that's done? That's what you should be doing." And I looked at her and I said, I just did that one. I said, I said, I just finished doing that one and I've just started on this one. And so it kind of took the wind out of her sails, and she left me alone then, and it was kind of a satisfying feeling anyway. But I paid for that too, I mean, they could be very vindictive and so on, so they had ways of making you pay if you did that to them. But anyway, that was the next thing anyway. So I was penalized in various ways for having done that. Like, it came back on me later on, it did. But that was something that happened. Um, there was one Friday night, she came to me one Friday just before quitting time, and she asked me if I would work overtime. Now, why they'd want me, of all people, to work overtime, I don't know. I was screwing up a lot, actually, because I didn't understand their system. I didn't understand the paperwork. If you're working in a warehouse, you have to be really good with paperwork, and I'm not good with paperwork. And I'm not good at understanding systems, especially if there's a lot of numbers involved and stuff, which there was. On this job, there was a lot of numbers, and I'm not good with numbers. And so, anyway, why they wanted me to work overtime, of all people, I don't know. It'd just be more hours for me to screw up. Now, I was good at things like cleaning out under the conveyor belts and stuff, but when it come to anything involving paperwork, which is about 80% of that job, I wasn't very good. But anyway, she wanted me to work overtime for some reason, and I had arranged weeks in advance. That Friday night, I was going to meet with some friends from high school. We were going to get together and have a kind of almost like a little reunion. And so I told her no, I couldn't work because I had a previous commitment. And she said, well, I want to know what that is. She said, you had better have a damn good excuse for refusing overtime. And I said, well, for one thing, I'm allowed to refuse overtime. That's the first thing. And I said, anyway, I don't have to tell you, but I will. I said, I'm meeting with some friends from high school tonight. I said, I haven't seen these people in a long time. I said, this has been arranged for weeks. And I said, I gave my word I'd be there. And I said, I'm going to keep my word and be there. And she says, oh, so you're going to a party? I said, well, yeah, I guess you could call it that. And she said, so you're a drunkard? We don't have any patience for drunkards here. If you're a drunkard, then we don't want you here. You can't be working here if you're a drunkard. We don't like that. And I said, okay, well, for one thing, it's none of your business what I do when I'm not at work. And for another thing, I don't drink, which was true, and it's still true. I don't drink. I don't touch alcohol. But I said, I don't drink. And she said, you don't drink. Going to a party, but you don't drink. And I said, that's right, because I said, I have a life outside of this place. And I said, I want to see these people who I haven't seen in a long time. So I said, yes, I'm going to a party. I guess you'd call it that. I said, some of them will be drinking, no doubt. I said, I'm not going to be, but some of them will be. And she said, well, I guess if you're not going to drink, that would be all right. I said, well, I don't need your permission. I'm going anyway, whether I have your permission or not. And she said, well, with that attitude, you won't last long here. And I said, I suspect you're right about that. Anyway, I lasted a couple more weeks. I got really sick. The unloading trucks in the cold and then coming back into the heated warehouse, and sweating and all that. My system couldn't take it, and I got really sick. And I showed up for work. I was running a fever. One day I showed up for work, and I remember she said something to me, and I didn't understand it. And she said, "You're delirious. Go home." And she was right. I was delirious. I was really sick. So I went home anyway. And then took me a few days to recover. And I called the office anyway there and talked to this Brian Bingley. And I said, well, I think I'm well enough I can come back. And he said, no, he said, we won't be needing you anymore. And he hung up on me. So that was my time anyway at the warehouse, working for a shoe company. But it's funny, there was one guy there anyway, it was kind of funny. I'll tell you the story. We got shoes from all over the world. Even back in 1989, there was very little produced in Canada. In Canada, they made a lot of orthopedic shoes, but that was about it. Most of the men's shoes came from Brazil, I remember that. And most of the children's shoes came from China. They come in containers and we'd unload them, And, well, normally when you opened up the big cardboard cartons with the shoe boxes in them, the ends of the shoe boxes would be pointing up. And the end of the shoe box that had the size and style and everything on it of the shoe would be looking up at you, so it made it a lot easier then to put them away, to put them in the appropriate places. But for some reason, the kids' shoes from China, oftentimes the boxes were packed backwards. So all the ends of the boxes were pointing down, and you had to pull the box out of the big box, pull the shoe box, and look at it, and then so it made it go a lot slower. It made it a lot less efficient when you were putting the shoes away with these Chinese children's shoes. Well, this one guy there, I remember one day I was working beside him, and he took his knife out and he opened up a carton of shoes from China, these children's shoes, and he got mad because, of course, the boxes were all pointing the wrong way, and he was frustrated with it. And he said, damn it anyway, he said, these GD Chinese shoes, he said, they do this all the time, the box is all pointing the wrong way, And I said, well, you know why they do that. I said, you got to bear in mind, China's on the other side of the world. And I said, they do that because what they think is that halfway across, they'll right themselves. Like the box is halfway across on the ship or whatever, that they'd turn themselves around, Well, he started laughing. And then he was telling people, well, you won't believe what that Tom Fournier told me about the shoes from China. And he'd get people laughing. He'd be telling them what I said, and the people would be laughing, the other employees and stuff. And so it kind of went all through the factory anyway, all through the warehouse, and people were having a good laugh about it. Well, I got called into the office, and I got dressed down for that, because I was told that work is not supposed to be fun, and that that was unnecessary conversation, that my saying that wasn't necessary for the performance of my duties there, and that because I had said that, now they could hear people laughing all through the factory, all through the warehouse, and they didn't like that, because work is not supposed to be fun. And so I had created a situation that was intolerable by doing that, and I was to keep my wise-ass, smart-aleck comments to myself, henceforth, basically, and that if anybody so much as cracked a smile because of something I said, I'd be out on my ear. So anyway, that was it. Yeah, it was a nasty place to work. It really was. It was horrible. But I got fired anyway, like I say. I didn't last very long. I did get fired, and I didn't really mind getting fired, because it was just that bad a job. Even though it caused some financial hardship, because I went from having a very meager income to not having any income for a while. And then, of course, when you went down to the Manpower office to apply for unemployment insurance, they had a way of making you feel like you were a piece of garbage. And you got less than what you were making. You got a percentage of what you were making. So I went from $5 an hour to about $3 an hour, on unemployment insurance until I could find another job. But yeah, it was pretty awful anyway. I remember it was an awful. They used to make it a really degrading experience if you had to go and apply for unemployment insurance. They really made it a degrading experience for you, you know. So they just treated you like you were a total bum and a failure, and they were nasty anyway down there. But anyway, that's the bottom line. That's how that went. But of course, after the shoe warehouse, I was kind of used to being treated like I was a bum and a failure after working for a couple of months in there. So yeah, it kind of primed me up for my trip to the unemployment insurance office anyway, to what they used to call manpower back then, which is the Canadian government unemployment insurance and so on, where you go for that. They became politically correct after that and changed the name. It's no longer manpower, it's now, I'm not even sure what it is, resources, human resources or something. Anyway, used to call it manpower in those days, but when you go down there anyway, they weren't very kind to you. That's all. They let you know in no uncertain terms that you were a bum coming in there with your hand out, wanting to suck off the teat of the taxpayer. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it for now, I guess. That's enough wonderful stories from a bygone era, I guess. We went from having some pretty crappy jobs in this country to not having any jobs, really, to speak of. But anyway, I didn't last very long in the warehouse there. Like I say, there were certain parts of the job that I was just really bad at, and you never got any credit even for the parts you were good at anyway. But legitimately, they were right to fire me because I wasn't any good at the job. That's the bottom line. I really wasn't. And the paperwork and all that, I was no good with that. But and also my health being what it was, I was no good. Like I say, I got really, really sick doing that job. And of course, it was very stressful. It got that I just had a knot in my stomach every morning going in there. I was just a nervous wreck because you'd be yelled at and degraded and stuff. It wasn't very nice anyway. They treated us kind of badly. Even if you were good at your job, they'd still treat you badly. I saw them in there treating people who had been there for 20 years like they were just garbage, people who actually were good at the job. So, maybe I deserved a little bit of it because I wasn't good at the job, but if you've been there for 20 years, the only reason they've tolerated you being there for 20 years is because you're good at the job, and I saw how they treated those people. So anyway, that's it for now. I guess there's no more to talk about. There's beautiful Rocky again. Hey, it is really cold in here, I'll tell you. But I'm going to try and go back to sleep, I guess, with this video's attempting to load up onto the interwebs. Being in here in this aluminum box, it'll probably be loaded up sometime around noontime. You guys will be watching this likely at lunchtime at the earliest. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll talk later.